Hi, my name is John Light, and I've spent over 20 years working throughout all corners of the recruiting world. Our podcast, Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool, is a resource to help you stay afloat and get ahead of your competition. Dr. Mark Lenox, it's great to have you with us here today on the Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool podcast. Thanks for carving out time to join us, first off. And second off, as we get rolling, I was just sharing with our producer about just what a remarkable career path you've had. And I know you're working on some incredibly interesting stuff now. And, in the context of tech talent and that sort of thing, I'd love to hear about that background, what you're doing now, and how tech and AI and machine learning and all these things are impacting that project as you go forward.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you here, John. I'm glad we could connect. I know you and I have been friends for a number of years, and we'll bring you up to date. So, in general, if you look at my stuff on LinkedIn, you'll see engineer, scientist, pilot, and That's kind of the core of what I am. Right. By training, I'm an engineer. I build things, and I've got degrees in several different kinds of engineering. PhD in computer science. So I'm really, I love that. I love being able to create something from nothing. And the scientist part, well, that's the part of me that likes to discover new things, kind of push the boundaries of what's known and what's maybe currently unknown that needs to be known. And the pilot part of me, that's a little more the adventurous part, and
the explorer,
part, and been flying for a long time, and it's one of those ways. It's one of the ways that I am able to kind of decompress a little bit and find out, figure out what's important. But so I've been in medtech for over 30 years, and I started working for a little startup company in Knoxville, Tennessee called CTI Pet Systems. And that company was the company that built the first PET scanners.
Right.
And I was around for all of that, the very first PET CT ever made. I left after 17 years, after they had been purchased by what is now Siemens Molecular Imaging. Mm-hmm. And that's was a fabulous run. It was a fabulous time in medical device technology. The FDA was starting to really understand a little bit more about software, and so we were kind of right at the forefront of all of that. And PET, of course, had a huge impact on healthcare, and that's where I really got a taste of what things really meant. It's one thing to solve a problem. It's all engineers. I mean, that's what we're really all about. Is we like to solve problems. And, but to me, I could come up with the greatest thing, cure cancer. Yeah. And, that'd be fantastic. But it doesn't really actually matter until you can get it out, get it into production, roll it out so that it can be used by regular people.
Right. The application side of it.
Application is where it all hits home. And that's where it becomes important to me. And I love the discovery process. I am, after all, a scientist, right? And I like that. But it's really seeing PET roll out and have such an oversized impact was really important to me. And while I was there, I led all of the real high performance development, especially for neuroimaging. Mm-hmm. And so I had a lot of exposure to that. It had a lot of personal importance to me. My grandfather died of Parkinson's, so I kind of had an inclination to work on a lot of that.
Yeah.
And then after it was purchased by Siemens Molecular, I all of a sudden had a lot more opportunity in front of me to kind of do whatever. And I thought it might be a good idea to retire, and boy, was I wrong. After a couple of years of skiing a lot and flying my airplanes a lot, I bored out of my mind. And that's about the time I went back to Texas A&M and was professor there and led the medical imaging program at the Institute for Preclinical Studies and did a whole bunch more work now in MR and CT and left ventricular assist devices and stents and a lot of cardiovascular work, all kinds of really, really great stuff. Got involved in an ultrasound company, QT Imaging. That's a breast imaging company that has developed a really nice imaging technology for detecting breast cancer, and that was FDA approved here a few years ago, and they're currently in commercial rollout right now. So,
well, that's where we crossed paths, actually.
That's right.
On a search I was working on. And,
at the time, I recall, and so that's still going great, and I'm really glad to see that happen too. And then in the meantime, though, I've gotten involved in a new startup where I'm the CEO, and what we're doing is a combination of MR spectroscopy and machine learning. And so, quick question. Do you know the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning?
Well, I mean, artificial intelligence, we're trying to get these adaptive algorithms to actually act like they're thinking, right? And reasoning to a solution. Machine learning, I think that's part of the process. You gotta teach it to do these things.
Well, there's a real fundamental difference between the two. And what it is machine learning is generally written in Python or MATLAB or something like that. Artificial intelligence is written in PowerPoint. So,
well, you know what? That spells we're doomed right there. If it's in PowerPoint, it's all over, man.
So anyway, the thing about MR spectroscopy is kind of a chemical analysis of what's going on at any time, and in terms of chemistry. So you do a spectroscopy scan of something, you can measure concentrations of a variety of metabolites because every molecule has its own resonant frequency. And so we can kind of do a frequency scan and see the concentration of all kinds of different things. And your brain is just this tremendous concoction of all kinds of chemical stuff going on at all time. And being able to kind of associate that with a fingerprint, if you will, is a really powerful thing. And but the thing about spectroscopy and it's been around since before MRI. It used to be nuclear magnetic resonance.
Well, I was going to ask, as far as what you're looking at, the scan, if you will. I mean, that's in place, right? I mean, hospitals, if they have an MRI machine, they have access to that aspect of what you're talking about.
Pretty much everybody can do spectroscopy, and it's got an MRI. I mean, it's the core technology that makes MRI work. And in fact, in a normal MRI, you kind of filter everything else out, and you're just looking at water molecules, really. Water molecules, sometimes fat too. But generally speaking, you're trying to get rid of all that other noise. We just open that up and look at all of it, and you get a chemical fingerprint of what's going on. And the problem with that is that human beings just can't read it. It's so complex and it's so subtle that you look at a spectrum of a normal person, you look at a spectrum of somebody that's really diseased. It's really hard to tell.
Can't see the difference, not with a naked eye, so to speak.
Not with a naked eye. But that is not true of computers. And machine learning allows us to really suss out some of these very, very subtle things that as human beings we have a hard time picking up on. And so with that, we're able to have a really pretty solid idea of what's going on in the brain. And our first application that we're looking at is diagnosing Alzheimer's disease. And I think this is a $1 trillion kind of healthcare problem in this country, and this is the kind of thing I like going after. Right, I want to have some impact, and this is a very powerful tool to go up against a very difficult problem. And there's a lot of going on. Yeah, there are a lot of things going on in that space. A lot of new drugs being developed. There's a couple of new ones been approved. But diagnosing it definitively is kind of hard, and we're tackling that.
question though. You're not diagnosing a patient, for example. You're not setting out to delivering a diagnosis for a patient who has clear markers already, has already been diagnosed, but you're trying to get it even earlier in stage, right? Because I think that's probably the key to treatment is before there's mass and momentum to any malady, any disease, you want to be able to go knock it out before it becomes this overwhelming sort of threat.
Right. And, I think in every case I've ever seen, and going back for even many, many years in PET, and this is one of the things that made PET so powerful, is that chemical changes precede anatomical changes.
Okay.
Always. And so if you can see what's going on chemically, you can get an idea of what's going to happen. And that is very, very important if you're trying to go after a degenerative type disease and try to understand what it is. And, technically, we don't diagnose it. That's the doctors.
Right.
But what we're doing is we're feeding the doctor some very good information to enable them to understand some of the subtleties of what's going on and make it possible for them to do something positive for the patient.
Okay, huge project that you've got going on to develop this. I'm curious, since you have existing technology that does the scanning and all that, I would take it that developing the back end of this, the machine learning aspect of it, whatever may be coming in from the AI side of it, how challenging is that? I mean, I know right now when you look around the market, everybody in their second cousin who's school age is probably writing papers and doing homework with ChatGPT, right?
Sure.
In fact, there's an attorney who got in big trouble trying to use that for his citations.
I read about that.
There was the Air Force recently did I read an article on this too. They recently did a study, a simulation with an AI powered drone and a human operator, and the drone was supposed to go hit this one target. Well, the human operator waved it off. And so the drone wanted to do its job. And so in the simulation, we're not at Skynet yet, turned around and attacked the human operator. So they had to put a fail-safe in there for that, obviously. And then the next thing, smartly enough, okay, you're not going to let me do my job. It went after the communications array so that the human operator couldn't tell it not to do its job. So there are a lot of pitfalls and a lot of, I guess you could say, kind of frontier aspects to AI right now and to all of this and how we apply this technology. How big of a hill is that to climb for your project, for your company?
It is a hill, but these techniques are being applied in other areas, other diagnostic areas, and especially in radiology. Right, radiologists are always in short supply. Anything we can do to help improve the efficiency and the accuracy of what our radiologists are doing is generally pretty well received. And when we've still got that human link is always there. Anytime there's a human diagnostic going on, there's going to be a human link involved. And that's, I think, a governing part of the whole process associated as far as what the FDA is concerned anyway. So that's in this country. In other countries, see if you're thinking like China or India or someplace like that that's very resource starved, they're probably likely to take stuff like this on even earlier than we would and give it much more latitude earlier than we would, because they simply don't have the number of people. You couldn't possibly train enough radiologists to cover just what China needs to try to give Western level healthcare to their population. You just can't physically do it. So
it'd be overwhelming.
It'd be very overwhelming. So they're different parts of the world are going to be different, and hopefully we can work this out in a nice way.
Well, when you start talking about technology, and I think it's completely applicable in this scenario as well. You're talking about generational changes, right? And it takes generations to build up the workforce with the necessary competencies to accelerate development, accelerate application. And I think one of the great things about AI is that it's going to help us accelerate even faster and maybe find ways to skip a generation or three as we develop things. Just like if you go back through human history, right? We always had these quantum leaps where, Henry Ford with the manufacturing line. Before that, you go back, was it the 14 or 1500s, and they figured out how to cast iron and cast bronze and these sorts of things to make cannons and whatnot at an industrial, commercialized scale, and it allowed them to make larger tools, larger machines, larger whatevers. And we've seen that happen over and over again. I was telling somebody the other day, we're talking about pioneers crossing the United States in Conestoga wagons and on horseback. It took a long time. They laid down the track and started having trains going back and forth. It sped it up a whole lot. It might take days instead of months. And then we started building roads, and we finally built the interstate road system. You could drive yourself across the U.S. in 3 or 4 days or whatever it might be. And then we came up airplanes, and we put the FAA in place and this series of airports and everything as you're familiar with. And now you can cross the country almost at will if you have the resources to do it. And I think as we go deeper into this, and as sure as you see this, as you develop it, it's going to be one of these things that you can just get to the answer faster and faster and faster, which means having the historicity of the why behind it and how it comes together is going to be more critical for decision makers going forward. Part of that's getting information, in your case, to the doctors who are going to make the diagnosis and come up with a treatment plan and that sort of thing. But I'm really curious, as you're going through this, are you seeing some sort of accelerative type effect in the technologies you develop it? And how much of that is tied to what you're learning by going through the process versus going through it vicariously because you bring other talented people in who maybe already have experience with this sort of thing?
Oh, yeah. So I think one of the critical pieces to any machine learning problem, any AI problem, is that you have to understand what the data is telling you. Mm-hmm. And this is where the data science really comes in. And machine learning, that's all really comes out of computational statistics. And this is stuff that's been around quite a long time. We're just now getting to the point where we've got enough compute horsepower to really, really apply it well. Mm-hmm. But still, you get right down to it. The data's talking to you all the time, and trying to understand what it's telling you and how to exploit it is really the most challenging aspect of any of this. And when you start talking about MR spectroscopy, like what we're using, there's a ton of information in that. And it is really, it's taking us a while to learn to speak the language. But as we get more and more fluent, we become more and more powerful. And that's, I think, true of all of these types of developments. And it is true. I've got a terrific team of people working for me to with me to help me do this. And they're bringing a very diverse set of viewpoints, and we've tackled other things together in the past. Most of us have, and now we're bringing a lot of that together, and it's pretty amazing.
So you're approaching this relative to the brain, Alzheimer, and I think I read or heard something. You're approaching TBI as well, traumatic brain injury patients.
We are, yeah. I would very much like to be able to solve that problem. Now, it's hard to solve it, but I would sure like to be able to diagnose it and understand. I think our servicemen deserve it.
Well, I mean, you can look through all kinds of applications for TBI in life. I mean, people in car accidents, and there are servicemen and women, absolutely. And really anybody who's gotten their bell rung more than once or twice in their life could probably benefit from knowing, hey, this subtle chemical change has happened, and now how do I try to address this, right? Because I don't know about you, but my biggest fear is not that, my hair is going to fall out too late for the hair.
Sorry.
My biggest fear is losing mental faculty, right? I love to read. I love to engage. I got 6 kids. I sit down and play spades, hearts, or 5 crowns or whatever with them and do these sorts of things. And there's a lot of banter and just losing those things that we take for granted every day. There's one thing that would concern me about getting older or getting my bell rung earlier in life and how it impacts me now would be losing those simple joys that we have every day.
Absolutely.
So anything that gets in front of that, deliver a knockout punch for me, that's golden. I'm curious because you're sitting up in Idaho. When I hear Idaho, I think about beautiful landscape, snow, and potatoes. And a blue football field, isn't it? Yeah, it's in Boise, right? Where they have the blue football field.
They do.
Up there. So I'm curious, when it comes to attracting the resources you need and the talent, because you don't really need a whole lot, I would imagine, on MRI experts or spectrometer experts because it's resident with you. But when it comes to developing the back end of this, how do you go about, or what do you target in terms of skills, background, expertise for your team? And the reason I'm asking that is you never know who listens in on these things, especially when you have a guest who's done what you've done or doing what you're doing. And, there could be somebody who's looking at this as a career path or an endeavor they want to tackle who has an interest like you do because you've dealt with Parkinson's in your family before. And I'm curious, what do you like to see from people coming in to help on the data science, machine learning, AI part of the project? What do they need to bring to the table, and what's important that you're finding as you develop this to be successful?
Well, yeah, I'm in Idaho, but none of the rest of the team is.
Okay.
We are a totally remote company. We are spread all over the country, and that's the way we're going to stay. And I think that is, for a small team, that I think is a real advantage. It allows me to pick up talent with minimum hassle anywhere, and that's good. But getting more to the heart of your question, when I'm interviewing somebody, and I've hired hundreds of engineers over the course of my life and of course my career, and I look for 3 things. I look for people who are skilled in the art, whatever it is that I'm hiring after. And in machine learning, I do have a PhD in computer science. I am not defenseless here. I get it, and I've done a fair amount of development over the course of my life too. So I want them to have skills. Whether they can program in a particular computer language or they've done something before or not, I don't really care. I care that they're able to learn, and I care that they are kind of open and inquisitive and want to go after something. I've often hired people that really had no experience in a particular area. I once hired an astrophysicist to do some inverse problem mathematics for me. And she's probably one of the best hires I ever hired, right? She's inquisitive, smart, driven, and had never looked at this problem before. But, astrophysicists do an awful lot of inverse problems.
Yeah.
And they're trying to extrapolate and pick up a lot of information from very simple sensors. And so it worked out really well. And I try to keep a really open mind about that. I'm not the kind of hiring program that says, okay, I must have the following things, and if you don't have all of these following checkboxes, I don't want to talk to you. It's like, no. Let's talk about who you are and what kind of things you bring to the table, and I'll see about what I can do to kind of fit the environment around you. Second thing I look for is I look for people who are just genuinely good people. All it takes is one jerk on the team, and you can completely demolish morale, You can completely demolish productivity.
Right.
All of that. I want people who are genuinely good people, and who are honest and capable, and are going to make their best effort to get things done, and they have to be able to work together with other people. It is a rare problem these days that a single person can go out and fix a problem. It always is a team effort. All of these types of applications are all much bigger than a single person. If you can't work with other people,
you're done.
You're done.
Yeah.
Forget it. I got nothing for you. The third thing that I look for, and the thing that I think is probably the most important, is I want people who buy into my mission. And whatever it is, the company that, in this case, we're going after Alzheimer's disease using MR spectroscopy and machine learning. What do you think about that? And if that is something that excites you and interests you, people will work 10 times harder on things that are important to them than they will on something that is not important to them. If it's not important to you, fine. I mean, I would love to help you find the job that is important to you. That's great, but this is probably not the one. And that is, I think, probably the most important thing. I've spent a lot of time as a senior executive, and I've spent a lot of time as a professor, and developing people in terms of skills and their ability to tackle larger projects is something I like to do. Mm-hmm. I like to see people start and work with me and grow with the organization and become whatever it is that they are capable of becoming. That's important to me, and that's why I'm still in this game. So those are the three things that I look at. And being fully remote, there's people out there that are interested. Granted, I'm not looking for somebody a developer to work on, pull down menus and dialog boxes, right? I'm looking for people with some pretty deep scientific background and that are capable of solving difficult problems, and they're relatively few and far between.
Yeah, but all three items that you just listed. Number one, I'd like to distill that and implant it into the brains of people at big companies, especially. But especially there's also smaller companies where they could use a dose of that, because look, there's a great study done. I think it was mid 2000s, like 06-ish, where this fellow followed 20,000 new hires for 3 years. He followed their hiring managers, the companies they landed at. And what he found at the end of the 3 years is only 19% were considered successful hires. Over half of the remainder had already departed. And the other half, the hiring team would have been happy to go make a different decision, because those people maybe they checked the boxes you mentioned earlier, like, okay, you've got this degree and that experience, check, check, check. And they can do the minimal responsibilities of a role. But I like where you're going with this. I like your philosophy that you want people who are inquisitive, curious. And of course, they've got to have that deep scientific background. But if you don't have natural curiosity, you're going to be lost, because that's not going to help you solve problems. I like the fact that you, and correct me if I misheard this, but I'm inferring that you're happy to train hard skills. Like, okay, you've got TensorFlow, but not Python, or you've got R, MATLAB, but we need you to learn this. We're going to invest in you to do that and help you get there, because we need it. But I really like what you say about buying into the greater story, being a part of the bigger story, buying into your mission, because I 100% agree with you. A lot of people, in fact, I would imagine that most people pursue the career because they see dollar signs, or they just need to work because they got to. And those aren't good motivations for the pursuit of a career.
I actually have a saying about that. I say it's easy to make money. Mm-hmm. It's hard to make a difference.
There you go. That's a good way to boil it down.
That's my philosophy on the whole thing.
Yeah, because, when I first got into the headhunting space 20-ish or so years ago, the old adage in the business, well, if the money's not right, nothing's right. And there is some truth to that, I suppose, day in and day out. It's got to at least be reasonable. But the people who did the best are the people, if you ask them what their top 3 priorities are in their job search for their new role, their next career step, you always have the best luck and always most enjoy and best remember the candidates you work with who don't list money, who don't list prestige or title, although that can pay a little bit in there. But it's really about, what are you pursuing? Well, I'm pursuing something greater than myself. That sense of purpose, I think, when you, especially dealing with a distributed workforce, is critical. Because no one's peeking over their shoulder. They're just working at their work product. That's all you see. And that's great. That's fine. But you still need the ability for each person to be so bought in that they can't help but work to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Exactly. And to your point, that can be hard to find because a lot of people are just chasing a career path. And that's where I started personally. I had an uncle who was an accountant. And I thought, well, this would be good to go in because I really don't want to go do fluid dynamics and become an engineer. And there were some other factors behind that too, but that's where I started off. And I realized 4 or 5 years after graduating that accounting wasn't the life for me. And went to find something better suited to my strengths, my personality. And to your point, I've enjoyed the ride when you see somebody and you help them develop and train them, coach them, point them in the right direction, mentor them, however you want to put it, and however big or little the contribution might have been, to see them taking those steps to climb that hill, to get to the next plateau, to go to the next one. But above all, enjoying what they're doing. Man, that's a pretty good feeling.
It's fabulous. And, and you look at my LinkedIn connection list, and you'll see that there are hundreds of my former students are there. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them to this day, they'll ping me, "Hey, Dr. Lenox, you got a second? Got this job opportunity. What do you think?" Or what do I've kind of become the inadvertent life coach to a whole generation of biomedical engineers, and I love it.
Yeah, I'd take it and run with it.
Sure, own it, right? And it's fabulous to watch. It's great to see them go out and be successful, and I'm all about it.
Yeah, that's if we could distill that into a drink to give every professor and every big corporate exec out there to have that disposition. It's great to focus on the bottom line, and it's great to focus on the curves and the grading curve or whatever it might be, or papers published. But to your point, having that impact, do you want to make money? Or do you want to make a difference? What's most important to you?
To be clear, I want to do both.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. But if you do if you do the difference, you're gonna find the rest.
You will find it. You will find it, and it will find you. I also say that capital finds talent, and that happens all the time too. So
if you're solving problems that people need to have solved,
meaningful problems, yeah.
And sometimes people do it by accident. Sometimes people do it intentionally. Like, was it 3M trying to figure out the next generation of glue? I was reading the story in a book, and
Post-it notes.
They couldn't figure it out. And finally, somebody started using stickies, and boom, Post-it notes. And no one ever knew. I never knew that was a problem I needed solving, but apparently I did, because my desk back then would be covered with pink and yellow and green and blue Post-it notes everywhere. So let me ask you this. So I remember years ago when we first spoke, and you were telling me you were going to be out of pocket from time to time because you were flying an aircraft you built, if I remember correctly, up and down the West Coast. And I'm curious. I don't need you to fly me anywhere right now, but I am curious. When did you start flying, and how long have you been doing that?
I first soloed in 1986.
Okay.
Been flying a lot ever since. I personally, if I want to fly, I fly gliders, sailplanes.
Oh, okay.
And there is no better place than the mountains of Idaho to go spend some time surfing in 3D. It's the Idaho mountains are kind of the equivalent big wave surfing in Hawaii.
Really?
It's really amazing. Now, if I want to just go mess around, I have a Cessna 180 that's been highly modified. It's been in my family for 30 years, and I dote on it heavily. And so if I want to head back up into the mountains somewhere, it's set up as a bush plane, so we take that up, and I have flown it all over the country. It's a fantastic machine. And then kind of towards the, I guess, 2014 to 2019 or so, before the pandemic, business was much different. And that personal effect was a big deal. And during that time, I had my own jet, and I flew it personally all over. And I put about 400 hours a year on that airplane. And that's a lot of travel.
Yeah.
I would not have survived the grind if it wasn't for that airplane. And now, since I've sold it since the pandemic, and what I find anymore is I don't need it. And business has changed so much since then that now it's purely it's kind of an anachronism because we're so used to Zoom calls or something. It's just so much easier to get on a Zoom call. And if you know the people that you're talking to, I can get a lot done on a Zoom call. If you don't know the people that you're talking to, I still have a little harder time. I think that personal connection is helpful in certain circumstances. But overall, an awful lot of business gets done electronically now. And so that allows me to live in Idaho pretty easily. But I still fly quite a bit. In fact, I'm a Part 135 charter captain for a local charter outfit. I fly for them a few days a month, and just to keep my skills sharp.
Yeah,
because flying jets, you kind of keep doing it, and I love the smell of jet fuel in the morning, and so I fly for them, and we do. It's been some of the most meaningful flying that I've ever done because, there's nothing quite like having like a heart transplant team on board. Mm-hmm. And we're launching to go somewhere. And not only do I have to get them there safely, but, somebody else's life is on the line to make that happen. And I find those trips to be just super rewarding.
Oh, you're making a difference, man.
Yeah.
One life at a time, right?
That's one life at a time. And it's great. And I love that kind of thing. And so, it's worth it for a few days a month for me to spend a little time. I'm still at a loss. I was at a loss when we first started talking. I don't know how you have packed so much into your days and your life, but that to me is impressive because I know, you and your wife, I know you've raised kids and, you've developed cutting edge technology and you're developing it now. But you're still finding time to go do those sorts of things. I wish our business culture in this country reflected more of that than it does. And I know that's not going to happen anytime soon if it ever does, but it does in my company.
It does in your company. Well, that's what's important. Right?
Yeah. A close friend of mine once observed, he said, Mark, you've got just the most amazing life. It's just remarkable. Mm-hmm. But you know that because you're the one that built it. And that is a truly, that was a pretty profound statement.
Yeah.
He gets it. He gets it.
Absolutely. Well, tell me, and feel free if you want to name drop your company's name, feel free to at any point, or if you're open to having, people who listen to this podcast go and take a look at your tech and what you're developing, feel free.
Sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. So the name of the company is Voxel Systems.
Okay.
And it is the website though is Omega MRS. And
Omega,
so that is our
MRS.
product name. Product name is Omega MRS and .com. And you can have a look and see what's there. And it's pretty interesting stuff.
Okay, I'm not going to hold you to this because I know it can be really fluid. But if you were a betting man and you were looking out into the future, when do you think Omega MRS is going to be out there making a difference on a larger scale?
Oh, soon. Very soon. There are currently 69 drug trials currently in process for Alzheimer's drugs of a variety of types. And they are really, they're really struggling. The clinical trials themselves are really, really struggling. And the reason they're struggling is they're having a hard time getting enough patients in their system.
Okay.
And they're especially struggling with trying to get early patients into their system. And because they can't diagnose them. I mean, they can't diagnose them until the people are starting to show problems. And so we're all about trying to help them find those patients early. And I think that we're going to be heavily involved in that moving forward. I don't need an FDA approval to do scientific research with a drug company.
Right.
And so we'll be in the middle of it, trying to apply this and also gain some additional information from these trials, so that we can further incorporate that and refine our models and learn a little bit more about what the data is trying to tell us.
Man, I think that's amazing. And I'm just thinking in my head as you were talking, how many years ago would this been a mountain that wasn't climbable, but it's something that you can climb today? I mean, because it might, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 7, whatever the number is.
Probably 5 years ago, it just wouldn't have been possible. It just wasn't enough compute horsepower to do it.
Yeah.
But we've got companies like NVIDIA out there who have been, dramatically, improving my access to compute cycles, because that's what it's all about. It's all about how cheap is a compute cycle and how many of them can I get in a really short period of time. And that's, and they're doing it for a different reason. They're doing it because they want to put a video game console on the desk of every 14-year-old kid planet.
Yes,
right?
I know.
And they want to do it for like $3. And that's great, because a lot of the same mathematics that go on to generate these three-dimensional immersive environments also happen to be a lot the same sorts of mathematics that we need to do what we're trying to do. So great. All for it.
All for it. Well, then if I do find consoles at $3 a pop, I may just go buy a half dozen. That would fit the family needs. Just thinking out loud here too, when you look at the fact, and this is one of the things that caught my attention, you've got an existing technology out there, the MRI technology, that's ubiquitous. It's all over the place. And you're taking that and you're ratcheting it up in terms of the ability to see what's actually going on, again, before it gets mass and momentum. And the diagnostic process is just, it's finding niches like that. It's not really a niche when you think about, you got Alzheimer's and you got TBI, but behind that, you can address who knows how many other issues, health issues for people with the technology.
I would love to apply this to prostate cancer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would love to have on a personal note, I would love if there had been, and if they would develop a reliable screening or testing for ovarian cancer. Yeah. Near and dear to my heart. And there's not one. There's stuff that, it's, maybe not, but there's just so many applications. If I were sitting in your chair right now, my mind would be spinning on a daily basis about where to go. But I think you're focusing in. It sounds like you've got a great team around you. And I know that data science, machine learning, AI, that's just going to accelerate where you're going, and I'm excited to see what happens with it. Frankly, I've bookmarked your website. It's on my browser and I want to keep tabs on it. And Mark, I don't know, offhand, if you want to share real quick before we close out, I think you delivered some great advice to anybody who is looking to make a difference with their career and follow a path that's driven by their curiosity and desire to do that. I'm curious from a modern technology standpoint, looking out, 3, 4, 5 years ago, we couldn't even address this problem. And part of it was compute cycles. Part of it was, getting people who actually had the experience enough to help develop these things. Where are things going to go next when you look out, not just for your company, but other companies? You're competing for what's right now a fairly limited pool of resources to drive the development of these technologies. I'm curious, how do you see that changing, developing, evolving over the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
You're absolutely correct. It's a very limited number of people that can kind of play in this in machine learning in general. A lot of people are diving in, but there's a difference. There's just because you went to a 3-week long machine learning boot camp doesn't mean you're that much of a data analytics expert. And the ability to analyze data and understand it and understand what it's telling you is a real skill. It takes years to develop. But I think this stuff is going to really change the world, and it's going to really change it in positive and negative ways. We are already seeing some of the negative effects of machine learning, deep fake videos and all this crazy stuff. But the potential gains for safer cars, safer airplanes, better medical diagnostics, all of these things are just so huge that we have to go after it. And it's like any very, very sharp tool, because that's what machine learning is. It is a very sharp tool, and you can cut yourself with it, absolutely. But a sushi chef with a really sharp knife
can create some art,
create some great things. And so I'm all about sharp tools, and if used responsibly. And we're gonna, socially, I think we're gonna have to adjust some to properly handle that. And there's going to be some issues around that. But largely, it's going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to find better applications for it. It's going to cause some upheaval. I think there's going to be some types of jobs are going to get replaced by it, just like any technology that's ever occurred. There are, when automobiles started displacing horses and buggies, all the guys that were building coach whips were all of a sudden
losing some business.
That's not going to happen anymore. You better learn how to build or maintain cars, and we're going to see a lot of that moving forward. Exactly what those killer applications are going to be, it's hard to say. I mean, yeah, cars, airplanes, and medical diagnostics. I think those are pretty clear. But there's going to be some others. People are going to get creative in how they use this stuff, and we're going to see some pretty neat things.
Yeah, well, that'll be exciting. And let me just say for a moment, thank you again for carving out the time to talk with us. And if anybody is looking for Dr. Mark Lenox, I know that they can find you on LinkedIn, and I know that they can find you at omegamrs.com as well, or 3D surfing on a glider throughout the mountains in Idaho.
That's right. My call sign's Kilo.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Mark. Very much appreciate it, and I'll look forward to seeing how things develop and staying in touch.
Thanks very much. All right, we'll take it easy. See you later.
You've been listening to Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool. This podcast is sponsored by Sabertooth. Sabertooth improves the quality of hire and speeds up the time to fill specialized machine learning, data engineering, data science, and developer roles, stretching tech recruiting budgets further by bringing the precision of retained search and the speed of contingent search to the market in one complete solution. Find out more at sbr2th.com and follow me, John Light, on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening.